our recent experiences in Portland Parks and Rec. And I can share that on Thanksgiving morning, we started it with a hike on the Leif Erikson Trail, but rather than going in from our usual Thurman Street access, we went in from Germantown Road, which I haven't been out that far since back in the day when I was training for marathons and would run the Leif Erikson. So it was really nice, and it made for a nice start to Thanksgiving. So Bonnie, do you want to go next and share your most recent experience in Portland Parks?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, Juan, go ahead, Juan, if you want to go. Sure.
Oh, no, sorry. No, I don't have any because I've been quarantining at home. So that's it. Very short.
Okay. All right. Bonnie, how about you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fact that I think on Thanksgiving, I did not leave the confines of my house, which is a little unusual for me because I do usually walk nearly every day across the street here in Grant Park. So, but it was still nice to be able to just cook and enjoy Thanksgiving just the same. But I also discovered with only two of us, what qualifies as favorite sides were very different than in years past. There's that.
Yeah, I bet. Patty, how about you?
Well, like Juan, I went nowhere. I can just about see the corner of Forest Park, and I can just about see a couple more glimpses from my window, but that's it, I'm afraid.
Okay. I think your story will not be unusual, I suspect. David, how about for you?
I'll admit it. I did a nighttime mountain bike ride on the Riverview wildlife area. I got a new bike light for my helmet, so I had a light on my helmet and a light on my handlebars, and I did a nighttime ride there.
Yeah, well, I understand that's a pretty popular thing to do, but I don't know why I know that.
Understood.
All right, Brooke, how about for you?
Well, I do neighborhood walks, so sometimes I get out to Tabor. And over the weekend, I did go on a hike in the gorge, so it was lovely. Nice.
Excellent.
I got a little bit of a view.
Good. Mike, how about for you?
It's been a few days, but a few days ago, just to get out of the house, we did a little walk down to the Rose Garden and walked through the Rose Garden. And I think the highlight was, it was right when the moon was coming up. And I don't know if you saw the moon about a week ago, but it was fantastic. And there were actually quite a few people in the park just sitting on benches that had come up specifically just to watch that.
Yeah, it was a wonderful full moon that we just had. So that's a great location to do that. Aaron, how about for you?
I also have been going nowhere, but I do run a few times a week. And when I run, I run by the Eastmoreland Golf Course. So get to see some nice trees and smell whatever those trees are that smell so good.
Good. Thank you. Let's see. I think the next person is Jenny.
Hi. Yeah. I, like Aaron, I run a few times a week, and I usually run over to Sacagawea Park and do a few laps around the big dog park there. And on Sunday, I got to meet a friend for a walk there. So that was really nice.
Great. Thank you. Adina, how about for you?
I went on about a 6-miler at Powell Butte this weekend, and it was lovely. I always love the transition between the high up meadow and then going into the forested trails and back again. It was great.
Great. That sounds really nice. Tim.
Good morning, everybody. I recently followed some advice from Todd Lofgren and went and visited Dodge Park. So Dodge Park is where the Sandy and the Bull Run converge, and it's out in Sandy, but a Portland Park because it's connected to the Water Bureau. So lots of folks out there fishing, beautiful little park, really nice. Thanks for the recommendation, Todd.
Cool. And Sophia, welcome. And what have you been up to recently in our parks?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, I am lucky enough to live across the street from Conomox Park in Northeast Portland, and we've been having some incredible sunrises because I get to face east. So it's really been really been nice to just be there across from the park. It's such a nice thing to have across the street from my home.
Very cool. Thank you. Let's see, Todd, since you gave that great recommendation to Tim, what have you been up to?
Very simple, keeping it local, walking in Westmoreland Park in the morning. We've had some very nice sunrises.
Yes, they've been really spectacular lately. Casey.
Well, for some of you who don't know, we moved our bubble to Tucson a couple of weeks ago, so you can shun me if you wish, but that's where I am presently. But right before we left from our condo in South Waterfront, I discovered how close Terwilliger actually is if you just wander down Corbett and go up Hamilton. And I was really surprised about how nice that was to have that.
Well, now you have Mount Lemmon that you can explore, which is a pretty lovely place.
And I'm happy to talk about the parks in Tucson.
That'll be a conversation for a different time. Let's see. Vicente, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Paul. Man, I was scrolling through my phone, man. I try to avoid some parks because I have PTSD when I see Title 20 violations happening. So, but the park that I recently went to, that it was just astounding. It was probably a couple months back, and hopefully I haven't said this already, but the Pelicans were out at Heron Lakes at Forest Lake a few months back, and it was just spectacular. There was probably about 75 pelicans or more in Forest Lake, just wading back and forth. So that was incredible. And then somebody sent me this picture. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, I can. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a little red tail on Heron Lake sign there. So just the beauty of Vanport all around.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know that pelicans visited at Heron Lakes. That is a really cool report. Just while we're on the subject of birds, I was on a site visit down on the Scappoose Flats and saw a whole bunch of sandhill cranes earlier this month, which was very, very cool. All right, Randy. You're muted, Randy.
Hi, I had some surgery recently, so I'm not walking very far. So Laurelhurst, my local park, has been my spot, and I wandered over the other day, and there was a fellow who had all his camping gear there, and he was on the hillside and was belting out the Beatles songbook. And the dude had a set of lungs. It was impressive. So real genuine moment in Laurelhurst Park.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Well, I hope your recovery is going well. So
Slow but well.
Yeah, I'm back in a boot, by the way. I had to have some additional work on my ankle that I injured last January. So I'm in a boot for another week. Claudio.
Sure. Good morning. Yeah, no, I also run a couple of times a week, and my long run's been getting longer, so that gives me a lot more range. Get to see more and more parks as I go. So last weekend got out to Farragut and Peninsula Park from a start in Hollywood. Caught a couple of other ones along the way, so that was nice. And this morning it's a short run, but it was with my son because I'm trying to get him into it as well. And that sunrise, man, it was beautiful. So
terrific.
Saw that one in Grant Bowl. It was nice.
Excellent. Lauren, good morning.
Morning, everyone. So I live pretty close to Selwood Park, so I do a little loop there and went and saw the new platform in the park. It's about a, I don't know, 3.5 mile loop-ish when you do it. So that's nice. But also I would highly recommend Hopkins Forest. That's not in our system, but it's a trail, about a 3.5 mile trail that you should take a look at too.
Thank you. And good morning, Tanya. How about for you?
Good morning. On Thanksgiving, we walked Mount Tabor, which is about a once a week endeavor that we do. And then we're trying to get the kids into running. So usually go past Essex Park and Kenton Park on that little loop.
Cool. Thank you. And Maximo, how about for you?
Good morning. Yeah, similar to most people, I've been sticking close to home and doing committed to with our team to when schedules allow to be able to get out for brisk walks here in the Southwest neighborhood, but recently was also able to venture over to Eastmoreland Park over Thanksgiving.
Very nice. In Kenya.
Good morning, everyone. I haven't ventured out to any parks. I'm actually in the process of, my wife and I are getting our property certified for a backyard certification for backyard habitat. So I've been doing a lot of work there and exploring parts of the property that have been the no man's land, and also venturing out, taking field audio recordings of barred owls.
Very cool. Yeah, we're in the process of getting our backyard certified as well through Audubon, and had our first spotted towhee of the season show up the other day. So that was kind of fun for all the bird nerds out there. Margaret.
Good morning. So recently I ventured out to Powell Butte, one of my favorite parks, and it just reminded me how much I miss living by it. Because I moved away from that area in August, and it's just one of my favorites because it has such beautiful views, especially on a crisp, sunny day.
Very nice. Nicola.
Good morning, everybody. I'm another vote for Powell Butte on Saturday. Beautiful views and incredible wind that tried to take my hat a few times. And I'm not letting winter stop me this year. So Sunday had a great hike in the gorge up Wygant Peak, and zero views because it was snowy and foggy and rainy, but still lovely.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful. All right. Well, that brings us to reviewing the minutes from the November meeting. And I'd like to see if everyone's done that. And if so, do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you, Patty. In a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, our minutes are approved. All right, so now Adina is going to introduce a new member of the Portland Parks team.
Great, thank you, Paul. So I'm pleased to announce that Sophia Xavier will take command as security manager for Portland Parks and Recreation, overseeing all park ranger program staff and bureau-wide security concerns. Sophia will transition from her role as park ranger supervisor to oversee the entire program. She brings a wealth of experience, including supervising work units, both with the Park Ranger program, as well as her prior position with SEIU Local 503. Sophia brings historical knowledge of the Park Ranger program, as well as a deep knowledge and connection to the city of Portland and its resources. She began her career with the city of Portland as a police policy advisor to former Mayor Sam Adams. And in the intervening years, she served as a program coordinator at Janus Youth in the commercially sexually exploited children program, and subsequently returned to the city as a park ranger, then lead ranger. After working in parks, she took a position in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, which is currently now known as the Office of Community and Civic Life, as a crime prevention coordinator. Sophia returned to parks as a ranger supervisor in 2019. And prior to her life with the city of Portland, Sophia worked as an organizing assistant and a tech specialist for SEIU Local 503, and as a network engineer and logistics analyst for Ameripride Services in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As Portland Parks and Recreation Security Manager, Sophia will be reporting to Vicente Harrison, and Vicente's role will shift to providing managerial oversight of the critical Portland Parks and Recreation safety, security, and emergency management portfolios. Please join me in congratulating Sophia and welcoming her in her new role.
Welcome.
Thank you all.
Sophia, I won't put you on the spot to say a few words unless you choose to.
I will say thank you, and I appreciate it. I am looking forward to working with everybody. It's really an exciting prospect for me to be in this position. I never really considered that I would be in this position when I was just a park ranger, but now I feel really comfortable with it. I know that I'll have a lot of great support from everyone, so I'm excited to get started. So thank you all. Nice to meet you all virtually.
Thank you, Sophia. And by the way, Park Ranger is the springboard to many jobs in parks. Believe me, I know.
Absolutely.
That's how I started back in 1997. So never just.
Look at you now.
Never just a park ranger.
Exactly. Thank you.
Adina, can I open my big mouth for 2 seconds?
2 seconds.
2 seconds. So happy for Sophia. Sophia and I really came into this program together and really had passions about developing this program to a world-class program. So I couldn't be happier. And I'm just tremendously excited to support Sophia along every step of the way to ensure her success. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you both. So I can, Paul, if you'd like, I just segue into my report.
Perfect.
Great. Fabulous. So of course, I want to remind everyone that I sent, that Brooke sent a written monthly report, which is, bless her heart, she managed to edit from 12 down to 7 pages. But please review that when you have a moment, if you haven't already. It's chock full of a lot of important information. But in particular, at the last meeting, Tamara had requested that we have a conversation regarding the camping on Southeast Oak Street near Laurelhurst Park. I understand that she is unable to join us today, but as I prepared to talk about it, I wanted to go ahead and have the little conversation. I can send her the update. And of course, the meeting's being recorded, so she can refer back to the recording as well. And then if she has follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer those. So as many of you know, camps on Southeast Oak Street near Laurelhurst Park were posted for removal and cleanup a couple of times during November. The effort was led by the Homeless Urban Camping Impact Reduction Team, also known by its acronym HUCRP, who coordinates with private social service groups, Portland Police, parks, as well as others. The posting was timed to be able to offer shelter beds at Mount Scott Community Center, which was reopening for shelter use at the same time. As you are also likely aware, there were some protests by community members opposed to this effort, and it also received a fair amount of media coverage. As of this morning, it was reported that there are approximately 20 to 25 campers at the location, which is down from the nearly 100 campers that were reported in November. Vicente sort of alluded to Title 20 violations. You should know that camping in parks remains a violation of Title 20, the city code that governs park rules. And when park rangers find campers in parks, they attempt to connect with them first, they educate them on the rules, and they offer potential solutions. Staff then enter the camp into the city database for evaluation. This critical step ensures that a camp is checked on and that services are provided as appropriate. We do have a number of large encampments on park property, particularly in natural areas. But because of COVID-19, city policy has changed and the threshold has increased. I'll put the link in the chat momentarily so folks can read the criteria themselves afterwards. The modified criteria is taken into consideration when the camp is evaluated by HUCRP. In most cases, camps are not being removed from parks or other areas unless they are meeting the threshold, which is why there is currently a proliferation of camps, especially in our natural areas. Park rangers and security team continue to proactively coordinate with city agencies on response and support to the houseless community. Ranger supervisors coordinate weekly with the Joint Office of Homeless Services on identifying outreach needs on Portland Parks and Recreation property. Park rangers continue to receive and distribute personal protection equipment and other helpful supplies to our houseless community members while they're visiting parks. Thankfully, we have both Vicente and Sophia on the line. So if anyone has any questions regarding how parks interacts with HUCRP, I'm sure that they'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Adina. I appreciate the overview here. And I guess maybe one question that's kind of broad would be how does this response by parks fit in with overall coordination with other city bureaus? Because clearly it's not just a parks issue, and that's the challenge, is that parks appear to be places where people who don't have alternatives can go. And as we know, there's a lot of impacts that occur from a public health standpoint and just from the maintenance of our park assets standpoint as well.
I'll kick that off and then I'll open it up for anyone else to add. So I would say that the 2 or 3 other bureaus that are probably most impacted as it relates to their physical plant would be PBOT, because there is a lot of camping in the right of way, on sidewalks and such. The Water Bureau, which maintains some open space throughout Portland, and BES, because they too have a lot of large swaths of natural areas in their portfolio. Oftentimes folks don't really discern between parks and BES properties because of the nature of their aesthetic. So those bureaus also contract with HUCRP. So it's the same organization, and then they in turn subcontract with other agencies that are involved with either refuse or refuse removal, other social service provision and the like. Sophia, Vicente, anything to add?
I think you covered it well, Dina. Sophia.
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Mhm.
I have a question.
Yes, Juan.
So just thinking that this is a problem I'm interested in because of the mental health. I mean, we see those folks in the hospital once in a while when they there's a lot of overlap between homelessness and mental health, and these folks run out of medicine and show up in crisis, and it worries me. But and also because the homeless are an easy scapegoat for politicians to drive their agenda. Overall, how is this a growing? My first question is, what's the demographic of these folks? Do we even know where they're coming? Are they local? Do they come from other states? Is Portland a homeless friendly place where other people are coming from, like some politicians would like to say? And then the other question is this a growing problem, a static problem, or is the homeless population decreasing? Do we know that?
I'm not a professional in this area, but I will tell you this: it is absolutely growing, and it will get worse, a lot worse before it gets any better. So that I think anecdotally, but also, I mean, I think we all can. It is exponentially worse than when I got here 2 years ago. So that I will say. The other piece that you asked about whether or not they're from here or coming from here, I think it's a mix. I think that in general, and the West Coast is attractive for folks who either are choosing to or have no choice other than to live on outside because of the temperate climate. And yes, Portland has been rather liberal in how they address or not address houseless conditions. And I know that Tim is chomping at the bit to weigh in. Tim is our public relations manager, but has spent a large portion of his career involved in low-income housing and houseless industry. So he probably can really speak to that.
Thank you, Adina, and good job on the portion that you covered. You're accurate. You know, we are facing a homeless crisis here in Portland. There is a homeless crisis in Arizona. There's a homeless crisis in Michigan. It is not specific to this city. We have a homeless crisis because of a federal disinvestment in affordable housing that's been going on for 3 decades. And the fact that people's incomes are not keeping up with market rate housing. So this is a situation that is growing. The city and the state have worked hard to put resources in developing new affordable housing, but it is not meeting the need, and it won't meet the need until the federal government begins to reinvest, and that's increasing resources for vouchers, as well as creating more affordable housing and more housing for people who are exiting chronic homelessness. So, and Adina's right, there are people who come here when they are experiencing homelessness, not always necessarily because they find it as an easy place. It's like any people who come to Portland, it's, you know, they may be coming here because there may be a job opportunity or a friend they're coming to stay with. It's not always just to come here to take advantage of the services. You know, lots of folks are moving to Portland, and that goes through the spectrum of where they're at with income. And then we have people here who are experiencing homelessness, folks who have been outside for long periods of time and folks who've been outside for short periods of time. With COVID, there's going to be a huge spike. We're going to have a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
We're going to have a lot of folks who are living outside who don't know how to navigate the system, who are unprepared for the dangers of being outside. You're going to see a lot of families with kids. You're going to see a lot of older adults. This is going to be a problem that's going to explode here in the next year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if the unemployment, the COVID crisis is not going to get better for months, probably a year. So I cannot imagine how this is going to get better anytime soon. So when Vicente, when ranger or park staff sees a family of homeless folks in the park, what do they do? What is it? Sorry to be very basic, but I just want to understand this a little bit better. If I'm taking too much time, let me know and we'll move on to the next item. But this is important to me.
It's a great question. Early on when this issue was coming to the Bureau and we weren't anticipating as much as we are now, it was a shock. I mean, like we literally didn't know what to do. But since then, we've reeled in and harnessed in our approach and our coordination with outreach agencies as well as partnering bureaus. So weekly, we're meeting with HUCCURP. It's the Houseless and Urban Camping Impact Reduction Program. We're meeting with them on a weekly basis. On Tuesdays, we have a navigation team meeting. That's a meeting with their managers as well as the outreach workers that go to areas as a preemptive strike, if you will, to offer services to people to help transition them out. So that's one meeting. And then we have a Friday meeting, a weekly coordination call with all the bureaus, all the public service or public safety entities, as well as many partner agencies such as mental health services and medical services, as well as housing services and that's managed by the Joint Office of Homelessness. So we're all meeting on Fridays. We're talking about where issues are. We're talking about that family we met with at XYZ Park. We're talking about that's an immediate concern. We're talking about where we're seeing kids at in our system so we can direct resources that way. We're talking about where medical concerns are. So all this coordination is happening on Friday. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but we literally go through it every week. Sophia attends those calls weekly. and we make sure we're spearheading resources where they need to be after our rangers make that first initial contact and assessment. So that's a little bit how our process goes. It goes much more thoroughly than that because it's a case-by-case basis.
And Juan, to your question, when staff actually come upon the camps, they're having conversations with the people who are in the camps, as long as it's safe to do so. And oftentimes, I mean, I've been on ride-alongs where the rangers get out and get grabbers and bags and are picking up hypodermic needles. So like, we are often the first, don't worry, they're bloodborne pathogen trained. They are the first response in our parks for folks who are going through homelessness oftentimes. And so it is a big, complex problem. The city is trying to address the issue at many different levels. And this is how Parks is able to impact these folks in a positive way, quite frankly. I think that Tanya indicated that she could contribute to this, but apparently her video is off, so.
Yes, thank you. I hooked up a second monitor and the video is not working now. So just, you know, as Vicente said, we are coordinating with other stakeholders and other bureaus and do that frequently and have good connection there. In terms of service, I do want to let everyone know that land stewardship is integral in terms of service. We are the ones on the ground at developed parks and natural areas. And I have some zones, South Zone, East Zone, that in particular estimate that 40 to 50% of their time in terms of maintenance of the park is related to the community that we're serving in terms of houseless community. And so there is a lot of interaction and care that is provided. And if there are concerns, then we have pathways for reporting that and have the support of the rangers, as well as you know, continue to ask for additional support. But as Tim and Vicente and all of us are aware, this is a growing concern due to many socioeconomic factors, and it is heavy impact on our parks for sure.
Yeah, one last thing I will say, and then we can move on. My fear is that, as I said, that this is picked up as a political token to paint certain cities as chaotic, liberal strongholds full of homeless people and violence, and we've seen that coming from the top of the government, and so. I do worry about this being picked up as a political, like I said, as a political scapegoat for someone's gain. If there is anything, I mean, I don't know how can we collaborate or help, but yeah, I don't know.
Thank you, Juan.
Juan. It's definitely been used that way. The bully pulpit bully is going to be leaving soon, fortunately. So hopefully the new administration will look at this with a much more compassionate and holistic approach than the current administration.
So that's the report for this week. I knew it was going to take up all my time. So Paul, I'll kick it back to you for the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Adina. We don't have Tamara with us today, so we'll jump right into the financial sustainability report that Mike will give us.
All right, thanks, Paul. So in our last working group meeting, we focused most of our time learning about Parks financial statements, and more specifically, some of the details of the methodologies related to budget and operating systems, as well as Parks spending and fund classifications. The information was that Claudia provided was really helpful, and we're gonna keep moving forward with this education. In future meetings, we're gonna have Jason Smith come in, and he's gonna walk us through some of the online projection tools and visualizations. And Chris Hilke, who is Parks Asset Management Program Manager, is going to give us an overview on Parks' known asset portfolio conditions, and other facets of asset management and valuation. So that should be really interesting. Claudio also gave us an overview of the budget calendar as it relates for this budgeting cycle. And as it relates to that, I thought it would be helpful with the passage of the levy. It would be helpful for me to touch on the Parks Budget Advisory Committee, also known as the BAC, as that's one of the mechanisms through which members of our board really have the ability to provide input on the use of levy funds. So the BAC is going to be working with Parks staff on planning for the fiscal year 21 to 22 budget cycle. And just a reminder that the Parks budget runs on a July 1st to June 30th cycle. So the key roles for our committee in this is going to be, among other things, helping to adopt a values framework for making budget decisions, and then providing feedback on those budget decisions based on how those align with the values framework that we've created. This work's going to probably happen over 4 to 6 meetings. We had our first meeting last Thursday. I think you can see on the agenda, we have our next meeting next week on Wednesday. Now, some of these earlier meetings are going to help Parks really prepare for the requested budget, which is expected to be due in late January or early February. I've mentioned in the past with this levy, things are going to be a little different this time around for the budgeting process. With this particular cycle, it's likely that we're going to have a couple meetings in the summer as well to help prepare for the fall budget monitoring process, because that's probably when there's going to be more significant decisions made about the use of levy funds. But in the shorter term, and I think Adina touched on this in her director's report, some of the budget priorities are going to be focused on 3 areas. The first is programming for summer 2021. The second is building a ramp for necessary parks infrastructure to support levy-related growth. And the third is addressing potential critical failures in operations. Just to give you an example, one example of a potential critical failure is Parks' work ordering system, which is at the end of its life, and it's unlikely that's going to be supported in the near future. So that'll probably be a priority soon. And then one last thing, I've talked a little bit as it relates to the budget levy capacity about a new levy coordinator position. And that's going to be one of Parks' first investments. And that job's probably going to be posted, I believe, next week. And I think the hope is it'll be filled by February, but possibly in January. So I guess it just depends on the timing of how fast they move with that process. So that's what I have. Are there any questions?
Great report, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions, anyone? All right. Well, thanks, Mike. We'll move on to Patty and the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group.
Thank you, Paul. Well, the working group met on the 1st of December. We had a return visit from Jim Owens, former board member, who had attended the virtual open house that ODOT has put on. He reported that there's really no significant change in the project since we looked at it last time. The last real hearing was in March 2019, and Jim and I both attended that. However, the ODOT is redesigning the exit onto I-84 so that it no longer overlaps the Eastside Esplanade. So 4F will no longer be relevant, and so that's a way of sidestepping that particular problem. The city is still barred from working on the project, so there's nothing from inside, from staff. The consultants who've been hired to look at the so-called covers have been told to wait until February or March. So, and meanwhile, the FHA has given the go-ahead for the project as a whole. So it appears to be moving forward, but without addressing the freeway covers, which is obviously a concern for us. So that's something we're watching very carefully. Another topic discussed was level of service for parks patrons and equity assessment. We're waiting for Kenya Williams' work on that. I gather Kenya, that's going to be ready in January, and it'll show, for example, percentages of each minority class served. So it's going to be a much level of service measure than the simple distance from each. The third topic was the replacement of Burnside Bridge with a seismically stable, and I are both on the be working on evaluation criteria for bridge type selection. The issues concern, or rather include, consideration of Waterfront Park and the impact on Waterfront Park, particularly the space under the new bridge. According to the kind of structure chosen, that will either be a large open, largely column-free space, or it will be a lower and enclosed space. And so we're looking very carefully at that, arguing, of course, for good sight lines, good light, real usable space. We're also concerned about the effect of using the area north of that part of the bridge as a staging area. We're concerned particularly for the well-being of the Japanese Memorial Plaza and the welfare of the trees in that area, to make sure they survive the 4 years or so of a disruption all around them. So that's a particular topic. Something else we're looking at very carefully is access to and from the bridge for pedestrians, particularly from the east side esplanade, but also from Waterfront Park. Pedestrians shouldn't have to walk miles out of direction. So that's something we're also looking at. What is coming up in our next meeting on the 16th is taking a deeper dive on those evaluation criteria, particularly as they relate to bridge types that are beginning to look like viable candidates for use in the three-part bridge. Fourth topic we looked at was Grant Park improvements. There really nothing very new to report on that. We also talked about safe access to parks. Many homeschooled children rarely visit parks, and there's an awareness program plus some ADA upgrades being made so that those routes to parks are better understood and give access to a lot of kids who really should have that access but don't at the moment. There's nothing new to report on the other topics we listed last week. Our next meeting is the 5th of January. Thank you. Do add anything, members of the working group, if I've missed things out.
Patty, this is Lauren. I just wanted to clarify in a follow-up discussion with Kenya. He's working on the equity lens and he can speak more to that, but he's actually not working on the tool, he said, at this time.
Oh, okay, understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty and Lauren. Any questions for Patty? All right.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll move on to Bonnie's report on the Process Improvement Ad Hoc Committee.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I sent out the document that Jennifer sent out, and this is considered final. It basically has all the information that I've shared with you all in the past, including the participants. You can see it there in the document. It ranged from a lot of East County representatives to some tree people. A lot of former urban forestry people are there. Some of the regular suspects in terms of folks who've been involved in this process for a long time, as well as other community groups. I don't want to call anyone out, so you can read the list yourselves. And in terms of the findings, we had the 3 meetings that we had over the course of the summer. And then this draft narrative went out at the end of September. Our final meeting actually was in September. And it's going to really refocus the efforts on ensuring good community outcomes, particularly for members of the community who've been disenfranchised. Some of the emphasis that I talked about in the last report. At this point, this process for the tree planting is considered, you know, at a stopping point for this effort. But in terms of what's going forward, my understanding is that the process improvement is going to continue for different disciplines across the two bureaus, again, being Parks and BES, because there are a lot of areas where there's a lot of overlap among those two bureaus. This was an effort to remind you all that Nick Fish started when he took over both of those bureaus, and it will continue. So this was the first effort focused on tree planting, and it will continue in others. But this group that was convened was particularly for the tree planting effort. So that's about it. If there's any questions on the written report, I'm happy to take those. Or if Todd, I don't see Jen on the call, but if anybody has anything they want to add, I know Todd has been participating in those.
I think you covered it. So BES team members and Parks teams continue to work together on tree planting, especially in the land stewardship area too. And so as we have more updates, we'll just bring it back to the Parks Board and keep you updated. Thanks, Bonnie.
Bonnie, it's Casey. I had one question. I was curious to know if anyone from any of the council person's office attended any of the meetings.
We didn't have direct involvement, but we did have both of the deputy directors of the Bureau. So Todd and Dawn from BES were in attendance. So yeah, not directly from the commissioner's offices, but you know, the deputy directors certainly have a pretty direct line to the commissioner's staffs as needed. Todd, do you want to add anything on that?
I'll just note that actually the last meeting, Tim Crail from Commissioner Fritz's office attended. He was just listening. And then we did a joint briefing, the directors from both bureaus for Commissioner Fritz, of which the new policy director for Commissioner-elect Rubio was there as well. So planted seeds for the future.
Great, that's great. And I appreciate the report. Just seemed to me that there are issues being raised that are kind of, we're a little bit beyond trees. And that's great that someone from council's office attended.
Yeah, you're right. And thank you for pointing that out. I'd forgotten that we did have the reps from those councils, the commissioners' offices who attended. And yeah, Casey, I mean, I want to reiterate that the reason I got involved in this is more because I'm more interested in the process improvement process generally. The fact that it was the tree planting first is certainly of interest, of course, but you know, I made it clear, I hope, that, you know, Parks Board and I want to stay involved in all cross-bureau coordination. So hopefully, as things continue to develop, I'll report back, and if there are other opportunities, I will definitely bring them up.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, guys.
Any questions for Bonnie? Okay, that means we can move on to Randy's report from the Portland Parks Foundation.
Sure, thanks. I'll just share with you one little picture. Can you see that?
Yes, it's lovely.
Cover of the magazine?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I'm not seeing it for some reason on my screen. Anyway, that's our latest thing. It was sort of fun. Popped in the mail yesterday. Another kudos. We've been actually winning all kinds of different awards for the bridge. So in our joint project with PPR and PBOT. So it's been kind of cool to get those. I don't have a whole lot to report. We're a little bit in a holding pattern, kind of dusting off from the levee and figuring out what the path forward is. We have some pivotal meetings coming up with Adina and with the park staff about our role, what our mutual lanes will be, what our relationship on summer free-for-all, what summer free-for-all will look like going forward. In the meantime, we're laying plans for our 20th anniversary. All very much an improvisation given COVID. We had great ideas of various events and whatnot, but not sure whether those can be in person or whether they have to be otherwise. So we're trying to create a very flexible 20th anniversary plan. Last night we had a great session with Vivek Chandas, who is a researcher, professor at PSU, and also chair of the Urban Forestry Commission as part of our Green Dreams series. We're going to be picking that series back up probably in March, looking at spatial justice and public space in downtown. And I've got some really interesting folks I'm talking to. Hopefully I can nail them down. So be looking forward to that. And then hopefully in the next time I see you all, have some more concrete plans for what our 20th anniversary will look like. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that last night. I just didn't get my act together to get registered.
We recorded it. It was excellent. It was really one of the most fun ones we've done. And I mean, not just fun, but penetrating. I mean, Vivek is just a really awesome brain and generous soul, and those two things come together, and this really wide-ranging look at climate justice. So he's well worth paying attention to, and it's a tight program. I highly recommend going and fetching it off of our YouTube site.
Thank you.
I will add that Vivek chaired that process improvement committee that focused on the trees. So he's been terrific.
Okay, well, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. That means that it's time for Adina to share with us the planning framework for Portland Parks and Recreation.
Great. Thanks again, Paul. So we've been thinking a lot about Bureau planning as we've been wrapping up and summarizing our existing plans. There is a lot going on with building a sustainable future, committing to becoming an anti-racist organization, and other planning efforts like level of service, cost recovery, and aligning cross-divisional work plans, to name just a few. And as 2020 has clearly shown us, we're operating in a very uncertain and fast-changing environment, one that doesn't allow for the perfect linear planning cycle of years past. To be effective, we will need to align our efforts at all levels of the organization. The goal of Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland can only be achieved if our services, programs, parks, and facilities are provided equitably to all Portlanders. We will center Black, Indigenous, people of color, refugees and immigrants, people experiencing poverty, people living with disabilities, youth, and elders in this important work. We are committed to doing a better job of consistently engaging internal and external communities in our planning processes and sharing back information about how we're using what we've learned. This is how we'll build trust and accountability, change the culture of the organization, and empower our community. It's how we become the organization we want to be. Kenya, our equity and inclusion manager, and I are championing the creation of a new planning framework, and we've pulled together a small project team to organize and manage the planning process. Nicholas Sisson is the project manager for what we are calling the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework. She's going to share our draft graphic now.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see, the Bureau's Healthy Park, Healthy Portland framework has three components. Where are we? We have existing performance metrics and plans we've recently completed to tell us where we are. Our 5-year racial equity plan, the 2017-2020 strategic plan, Vision 2020, and community work we've done around sustainable future. In addition, we'll rely on other city and community resources and data sources to inform how healthy the park system is and how healthy Portlanders are. The second component, what more can we learn from each other? Through past efforts, we have received input and information in various ways from internal and external stakeholders, such as the employee survey, recent racial justice listening sessions, community surveys, and listening sessions like the 6 Sustainable Future listening sessions we held with the community in October. We've also received input from our community advisory committees like our Budget Advisory Committee and the Urban Forestry Commission. Throughout our work, we will be in continuous partnership, coordination, and dialogue with staff and community to continue to identify and fill in gaps in information and refine our decision-making and our strategic approach. The third component, what do we need to do together? We will translate our work into a new vision statement, mission, values, and strategic objectives, and build in accountability and transparency through performance measures, work plans, and monitoring and evaluation. Racial equity is at the center and will inform everything we do. As you know, 29 team members recently completed results-based accountability training that is preparing us for an anti-racist approach to our work. We see the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework as a cyclical, overlapping process of continuous improvement that goes on forever. That said, we will always be bound by decision points and milestones imposed by city processes, such as the budget process and annual performance reporting, which means we will be making decisions while we improve our processes. We see this graphic as a draft that will evolve over the next year. For example, as we begin a conversation about our vision statement, mission statement, and values, the center words may change to reflect our work. To spark thought and conversations, the working draft has racial equity instead of equity and care instead of maintenance. Phase 1 of our planning process goes from now until January of 2022, when we submit our fiscal year 22-23 requested budget. Kenya and his team, with assistance from many throughout the Bureau, are currently creating a new equity statement and equity lens. This work will happen prior to the Bureau's work on our vision, mission, and values, and creating new strategic objectives. We are beginning a series of employee gatherings meant to inform and engage all staff members about this planning framework and other topics of conversation. Let's take a look at the schedule now. This week and next, we're hosting our first employee gathering with 2 options, morning and afternoon, so the maximum number of team members can attend. We'll be talking about the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework, giving a bit of a levy update, and then spending some time sharing progress reports on 3 major Bureau plans, Parks Vision 2020, the 2017-2020 Strategic Plan, and the 5-year Racial Equity Plan. Employee gathering number 2 in January will share results of the employee survey, racial justice listening sessions, and community listening sessions. Then we'll have a lot of time to have conversations about how we can best address the things we've learned about in our work together. At our 3rd employee gathering, we will take a deeper dive into the Bureau's racial equity work, good and bad. Kenya and his team will also share the Bureau's new equity statement and equity lens. Our 4th employee gathering will take the group through our planning approach for 2021, vision, mission, values, and strategic objectives, and how we'll connect these to levy-funded programs and projects. We'd like to suggest that the Parks Board go through a similar series of conversations to prepare for our planning work in 2021. You've already seen progress reports on our strategic plan, 5-year racial equity plan, and Vision 2020. Depending on what else is on the board's agenda in the first part of 2021, you may want to consider the following. On January 12th or February 9th, we can share results from our recent community listening sessions and then take the board through the same exercise and the same questions. We think this would take up about 60 minutes of your agenda. On March 9th, we can have Kenya and his team do a deeper dive into our racial equity work, introduce our new equity lens and equity statement. This would take about 60 minutes. Learning about the Bureau's new equity statement and equity lens would be a perfect jumping off point for your equity affirmation revision. Then, at the April meeting, we will present our approach to planning in 2021 and talk with the board about how you'd like to engage over the spring, summer, and early fall. Until we finalized meeting content, the time shown are just estimates. We may be able to do the first 2 sessions in less time if necessary. Overall, the work included in our Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework will help us align our goals, strategies, and resources, and will inform our budget work for our 2022-23 requested budget. In the long term, as we get more disciplined about using the framework, it will move us toward being the kind of organization we want to be, both in terms of bureau culture and service to the community. We know that if we have healthy parks, we will contribute to a healthy Portland in many important ways. Thank you, Nicola, for driving and for your work on this thus far. And I'd like to just open the floor for any questions or comments.
So thank you, Adina. I think that's a great overview, and I'm excited about working with staff on, vision, mission, values, and strategic objectives to be really well aligned with staff. So that's exciting. So I think we'll definitely be looking at melding that with our agenda for the January board meeting.
Great. So am I to understand then that the board is amenable to taking those two 60-minute portions of time in upcoming meetings to devote to this work?
I'm speaking for myself. Yes, I'm excited about it. So I'm eager to hear from the rest of the board in terms of people's reaction to what you just presented.
I see a thumbs up, a virtual and a real one.
Good.
All right.
Can I interject one question? I'm really interested in hearing about the community listening sessions. And it looks like you're got January's topic. I'm curious how that affects timing of our ability to provide input as it relates to budget and financial decisions in the near term that might need to be made relatively quickly.
That's a good question, Mike. So my sense is that as we've been talking about budgeting as it relates to the levy, we've been talking about the ramp year, which quite frankly has less opportunity for community input, and it's more about ensuring that the Bureau creates an infrastructure or the bones of what we would need to sustain the following 5 years of the levy. So I feel like the timing is we're still on point, and we'll still have plenty of time to receive even more input. Yeah, I think we're okay timing wise. The first year or year zero, quite frankly, is less outward focused and more inward focused. And it's really going to be about making sure that the Bureau's set itself up to support the work that we're going to be doing throughout the rest of the levy's life.
Other comments?
Thank you.
This is Randy. I'll get back on camera here. The various plans that you outlined or visioning processes, are those effectively going to be the next Parks 2020, or are you thinking in that these are steps towards that?
Yeah, I don't envision that we want to do a as long-term vision process as we did with the Vision 2020. I've kept it kind of loose when I say strategic objectives because we're not really sure what format that's going to take. And as the senior management we've had and the project team, we've had a discussion about not having a separate racial equity plan, but rather having an organizational plan that would incorporate racial equity in everything that we do. So not to call it out separately. I see either a vision statement or value statement as not necessarily taking the place of the Vision 2020, but we found, I mean, you saw the analysis or the review of the progress report for 2020. It's, a 20-year vision it's stale after 5 years, right? Like too many things change. There's too much unpredictability. So I don't envision doing a full 20-year plan. I hope that answered your question and I didn't ramble too much.
No. I mean, I guess I think that historically well-done plans are updated, more regularly than Parks 2020 was. I mean, if you look at any of, Portland's legendary plans, I mean, there's a, constant sort of updating that go on with them. It isn't just like it's done in, 20 years, okay. So I kind of wonder about that process, but more I think about it in terms of thinking about what, the real sustainable future is. And, I mean, the equity work is really important. But I guess I'm uncertain of whether that sets the stage for whatever, whether it's levy renewal, bond levy, some other, taxation, that it creates a sort of, sunshine on the horizon, that you need to really sell the, the voters in the city on, on an investment.
Right. No, I understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the framework is actually is structured in such a way that it will run in perpetuity, right? So that you're constantly updating and refining your plan, as it were. And absolutely, this the sustainable future piece is embedded in that in the graphic. You'd seen that it was within one of the components, and it will continue to be throughout the 5 years, because that the levy fits into the sustainable future, as does the other alternative funding opportunities that we're going to have to investigate for long-term sustainability of the organization. So it will be included for sure. Todd.
I just wanted to add, I think one of the weaknesses of the Vision 2020 plan is it really was a plan, not just a vision. It became too specific. And so that's, I think, the pitfalls we want to avoid, claiming that it has this comprehensive inventory of all the things that we should build over 20 years, talking about, the walking city of the West, and then miss the fact that, biking actually is what happened over the last 2 decades in the city, but it's not even in the plan. So, it's keeping the vision statement at the vision level, like you're describing, of the aspiration, the organizational purpose, kind of our North Star. Yes, we need that, but not getting into that trap of being too specific over the 20-year period that then, gets us caught up in things that are misaligned. And I think centering the equity work and centering kind of community-centered decision-making helps make it like intentionality around an iterative nature of the planning process. So keeping your vision higher and not as specific, not as long a document as we had in the Vision 2020 document.
That really makes good sense to me. I think having a vision out there that is aspirational, that sort of sketches what the future looks like, doesn't detail it, makes sense to me. The piece that I think is really important that we're skirting around, and Adina has alluded to it, we've got this levy, which is going to provide much needed operating funds for the next 5 years, but we still don't have a sustainable model. And, we've looked at a variety of ways to address that, which was completely blown up with the recession that's coming as part of the pandemic. But that doesn't mean that we don't really need to be focused on, do we need a special district for Portland Parks and Recreation? Or what are the economic funding mechanisms that we need to sustain Portland Parks and Recreation? And we really, we've got 5 years where we've bought time, but 5 years is going to pass really quickly. So I really want to encourage all of us to think about how do we create a sustainable model, and what, does that mean going to Salem and talking about changing some of the requirements for special districts? Can we have an alternate board than what the current legislation calls for? We need to be asking these questions, because these things need to be scheduled in legislative sessions if we're going to pursue them, and that takes time. So I want us to, as Todd said, look to the North Star, which guides where parks will be, 10, 20 years from now, but also really actively think about what do we do for that period, starting 5 years from now, when the levy has run through. It obviously can be renewed, but that still doesn't solve the inherent sustainability issue.
Paul, I noted that Casey had his hand up, and Kenya also wanted to speak.
Thank you.
Just quickly, I'm wondering if you think, as a byproduct of this, will lay the foundation for what might be revised mission and goals for the board.
I hope so.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we also suggested that maybe the board wants to tap the brakes on their equity affirmation statement and do it either in conjunction with or in alignment with the Bureau's work on the same. It seemed to make sense, and yes. And also, yeah, and quite frankly, the board's input and feedback on the mission and the values is crucial. It's really important, because as advisors to the Bureau, we need to make sure that we're all in alignment on that. Even though it's the mission for the Bureau, right? The board helps to guide our work. So it's really important that you all participate in that as well. Kenya?
Yeah, I also want everyone to be mindful of historically who's been left out, and who we don't serve, not just as parks, but just as government. And centering equity, I feel like it's fundamental to what we do. If we're talking about investment, we're talking about money, we're talking about equity. It's very important that we lead with equity to serve our low-income families, our immigrant and refugee communities, our BIPOC communities, because historically they've been left out, disenfranchised, and it's pretty obvious. When we really look at where the best parks are in the city, where the cleanest parks are in the city, when we start thinking about those types of things and the amenities that, some parks get, or in some parts of the city. So, I really think, with equity being first, it sets us up for success, because, even if we're talking about a plan and we're talking about 20 years down the road, we also got to think about, the demographics, of Portland and how it's shifting. So, this is front loading, we're preparing, for the future. And I think that's monumental, regardless if it's, things, I think really it's about the people, and really we're putting people first. And that's something that, I have to personally say that with this current leadership, I've been super amazed and just super proud. So I just wanted to put that out there, because it feels good to put people first.
Thanks, Kenya. I mean, it makes complete sense. Who do we serve? We serve people, so I think recalibrating for the people who have been overlooked is vitally important. So I 100% agree with what you just said.
Patty, I see you and your hand up.
Thank you, Adina. It was really just a follow on from a comment you made about constantly updating the long-term plan, and also picking up on what Paul was saying about incidental things we need to do. I think it's very important that we have a formal period of review of the entire plan, and it's probably more frequent than every 5 years, which is sort of conventional. Because I think that as one does that sort of as you go updating, it's very easy to miss out on other things in the background. And one needs to take that overall view and make sure that we really are keeping everything up to date. So as we look at this, I'd like to suggest that there is a formal review of our long-term plan, maybe every 3 years. I don't know what the correct period is, but something of that nature, so that we make sure that the vision is there, that we are in fact seeing the North Star, not a cloud somewhere, and we're really heading in the right direction.
Thank you, Patty. I see it even more frequent than 3 years. Every year we make decisions with our budget about how we're going to serve the people, right? So why not every year? Why not look at what, take a look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it every year as we have a conversation about the budget, because the budget's guiding all of the work. So yeah, thank you for that.
That's great input. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I'm just, maybe I'm just a little bit lost, so sorry about that. But so the idea is there would be a 5-year strategic plan, but there would not be a 2035 plan?
That's what we're saying.
Because I'm hearing a mix of people talking about long range planning and then talking about the short range planning. And so where does the long range planning play into that 5-year strategic plan scenario?
So I can
Patty,
take,
or maybe Patty's. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we made a decision that we were doing a 5-year plan. What we've noted was that we would be creating strategic objectives, and we did not put a timetable on that as yet. But I do know that a 20-year vision, it did not work, especially in the format that was previously implemented.
I think we do need a very long perspective on some issues, however. So I think it's useful to have that very long view as a context for a 5-year plan. So I think that, we shouldn't limit it to a 5-year plan. I mean, there's always things that we anticipate will happen or should happen, and need to keep them within our view.
Certainly. I mean, we even have budget projections now, right? So
right.
My point is that I didn't want to put a year on it. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It didn't feel comfortable. We have to go through this process for a year and really figure out where we are and what we need to do. And then we'll have a better sense of what that should look like. Todd, I see your hand raised.
I just, in Director's long presentation about kind of the milestones that were required to follow for the city, just highlight a couple. We do 1-year performance monitoring in our proposed budget, reporting on that. We propose a new annual budget. We do a 5-year financial forecast. We balance our budget over a 5-year period. And we have a sustainable future program that's getting to kind of what I think Patty's talking about is, we have assets that last 25, 50, 100 years. And so that's the sustainable future that takes us out beyond the 5-year horizon that the city really doesn't do, but we're doing within the Bureau. I think this process will, like Director Long just said, will evolve of what the right timelines are for what strategic objectives and set targets on those timelines. And we, as a group, can decide what's the right time to, report on those results. But this, we've all been around strategic planning a long time. Why do we gravitate towards 5 years? Communist China, 5-year plans, federal government, 5-year plans. There's nothing magic about a 5-year time horizon, right? It's about the results we're trying to achieve, holding ourselves accountable. And so we need to work through, I think, both as an organization and with the community, is like, what's the right pace to set the kind of time horizon, but at the same time, BES ended up with more of you're always moving the 5-year time horizon forward and you never reach year 5. The whole idea, the fact that every 5 years we'll sit down and spend 18 months going to strategic planning processes is kind of an antiquated notion. We need to be doing continuous process improvement and evolution on a regular pace. We can pick what that pace is. Is it every year, every 2 years? And we're always striving to something that's 2, 3, 5 years out. But the idea that, you know, we do these plans and then put them on the shelf, no one uses them, no one reads them. I've been part of a lot of those processes in the federal government, city government. Like, we just can't do that anymore. We spend so much time and energy of people and organizations, and it's not helpful to organizations. We need this to be real to the employees and the community.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I agree with that. I have also been in the nonprofit world, very in that process of you make the strategic plan. But in the end, I think my perspective is just when you're within 5 years or 3 years or 2 years, you're in the realm of all practical and not visionary, which makes sense if you're spending a lot of time, you want things to be practical or achievable. But to get beyond that, you have to go farther beyond what you want to accomplish. You know, like, what is a vision? At least from my perspective, from business planning, 5 years is not enough time to get that much done. You know, it has to go beyond that if you're thinking big. That would be my only point.
Yeah, I want to echo that. And I think Patty was alluding to that as well, that some things do require thinking in the 10 to 20 year time frame. And I think we're talking about it differently. I think what Todd and Adina are describing as the North Star is what's going to help us accomplish that. We just need to build that out a little bit so that it's something that has some of the concrete elements that those of us that are familiar with traditional strategic planning, for all its strengths and weaknesses, something that kind of fits that model a little bit, while also addressing Todd's valid point that, you know, a lot of those plans sit on shelves and don't get accomplished. So,
well, I think Aaron and I are saying the same thing. We're just missing each other. Is that we're going to have strategic objectives that will be 2 years, 5 year time horizons, but we know on the asset side, they're much longer. So having an artificial timeline to bound it to 3 or 5 years when we know we have 10, 20, 30 year actual plans, not visions, but actual plans around asset management that we need to do. You know, that's what the flexibility we're trying to build into this model. So I think I appreciate the feedback, and we're going to work through it the next year.
Okay, well, I will look forward to that conversation. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I guess I want to just reinforce what Aaron said, because I feel like, you know, I understand the Parks 2020 plan is a sort of, you know, somewhat antiquated way of looking at things, but I don't know how you get to, you know, an Albina vision or how you avoid a Columbia pool without a longer time horizon. You know, how are we going to think about, you know, the waterfront, you know, in the future? You know, how are we going to think about, you know, East Portland as a much more urbanized, you know, situation, you know, than it is now, and particularly in light of, you know, I think that the, you know, demographics, as Kenya pointed out, are, you know, coming at us both in terms of the diversity of folks, but also the sheer number. You know, because climate migration is going to become a real thing here, and you know, we're a big star on the map, you know, for the, you know, next 20, 30 years, and all of the tensions that we're, you know, feeling now, you know, are going to be acted out one way or another, you know, in our park system, and you know, and even something like, you know, the thing we were talking about last night, you know, in terms of street trees being regarded as infrastructure. only 40% of the voters thought that that was a good idea. And so how do you build momentum toward that is by creating a longer term vision and building a constituency around that. And I don't know if you get there, that you can get a levy renewed and a bond added to it and some other funding mechanism without a horizon that looks beyond 5 years. I just firmly believe that people still need to see something on the horizon. I feel like that was maybe a little bit of Metro's problem, with the transportation bill, as it was, kind of parts as parts, as opposed to a coherent vision for the future that people could buy into. And so I, really just want to encourage us to, think about this, look at best practices elsewhere. Meantime, this work that you're doing is, we're doing is incredibly important, but let's, keep our eyes, a little farther ahead of our feet. Or at least at some point in the next 2 years before we have to really start a serious campaign for, more money, that we're, getting our eyes up to the horizon.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding. When I said that another Vision 2020 is not the direction I'd like to go, look at the Vision 2020 plan and remember when we did our review, and not just antiquated, but not helpful for the Bureau, one. And two, as Todd also spoke to, in that last bucket, as it were, when we talk about strategic objectives, those will be sized as appropriate depending on what it is we're talking about. So clearly, we are looking at the length and the life of our assets. We are thinking about climate change. We are thinking about urban canopy. This is our work. So I just wanted to put a little exclamation point at the end of that so that folks don't think that we're not thinking long-term. This framework is to get us through the next year and a half, and then it continues on. So.
Well, it's clear that this will be a topic of discussion going forward. So I'm looking forward to starting that next month and going from there. But yeah, I think it's really critical, as Randy was pointing out, and I think as Todd and Nadina were also saying, we need to have a North Star. That is the rallying, coherent vision that builds community support to support parks going forward. So I look forward to helping to craft that with all of you. Okay. One thing we want to cover here is that there is an opportunity for up to 2 volunteers to participate in the 2014 Bond Oversight Committee. So we don't need to decide that today, but we would like to have at least 1, potentially 2 people from the board participate in that oversight committee. And that's for the last little bits of the 2014 bond measure.
Paul, we actually need 3.
Oh, we need 3. Okay. I'd heard that there were 2 available to the board and that 1 was going to be from the community. So thank you for clarifying that, Lauren. So 3 it is. Anybody just chomping on the bit to be part of that oversight committee? I see David raising his hand. Great.
Maybe Lauren can just speak a little bit about what it entails.
That'd be great.
Sure. So the Bond Oversight Committee was a requirement of the 2014 Parks Replacement Bond, and it started, in 2014. And they've been providing us oversight of our financial management, our transparency, and they provide us input quarterly on how we're progressing. So we prepare write-ups and they give us feedback on that. They also provide us as a sounding board for decisions on shifting of funds. The park bond was pretty specific about amounts allocated to the different classifications of projects. And so there's been some where we've underspent, and so we moved it into some areas where we need a little bit more money. So that's the extent of the involvement. They write a report once a year, and the current report is going to be at council the week of the 15th. Is it the 17th, Todd? That it's actually going now?
I think so. I think we're getting a time certain.
Yeah. So does that help, Adina?
Yes, thank you. I just thought it would be helpful for folks to know that this has been ongoing and that we have people who are who either have chosen not to continue or are otherwise rolling off, so that the work's been getting done for several years. We just need to make sure that we have a full roster going into its final years.
And this will be a 2-year commitment, likely, before we've wrapped up everything and had our final overview of the bond and how we did.
And Lauren, just to reiterate, that will be a quarterly meeting that occurs over the next 2 years?
Correct.
Yeah,
And
good.
sometimes we've been doing them virtually, since March. And sometimes we don't need one, and if no one has a question, and so we just send out an email, but typically we meet.
Okay, good. Well, we're 1/3 of the way there. So thank you, David, and we'll look forward to other people contributing their time between now and the next meeting. All right. So what we wanted to do in this last part of our meeting today was to check in on goals that we had established at our retreat last June. So Brooke had shared with all of us the board service objectives from the June 2020 retreat. And there are 4 areas that were bulleted. Those were financial sustainability, community engagement, equity, and board functions. So what we'd like to do is to break out into 2 different breakout groups for about 15 minutes. Bonnie will lead one, I'll lead the other, and we'll just facilitate a discussion on how are we doing? What progress have we made over the 6 months since our retreat? And do we want to change any of these? Do we want to redouble some of our efforts on some of these? Just touch base on where we've been and where do we want to go in the next 6 months for this board. So is that clear to folks before we break into the breakout rooms? Don't see any questions. Randy's going to leave a little bit early. Okay, so Brooke is going to send us to our rooms. We'll see you there shortly, and we want staff to participate. So we have staff assigned to these as well. So we'll see you all soon.
I feel dropped like a hot potato.
Yeah, that went really quickly. Thank you, everyone. We had a very vigorous conversation that covered one topic. Bonnie, why don't you report for your team first, and then group 2 will go second.
We also felt like we were talking very fast. But we started off talking mostly about financial sustainability and equity. Vicente described it as he feels like we had a bad clutch for a while, but we have the clutch fixed. We're now in first gear and we're getting ready to shift gears in terms of getting the levy passed, having a good basis, having Kenya on board to address some of the equity things that have been in the background for a while. We also heard from David, who was very interested in getting more involved in some of the work planning and some of the prioritization type projects. So those are the kinds of things that he was most interested in. Tanya noted that, you know, some of these objectives are pretty aspirational. And we talked about the fact that, you know, maybe when we set objectives like this, we need to at the same time consider what the metrics might be, because in all instances, you know, what you measure is what improves. And so right now, it's not clear either how we quantify what is being achieved or how successful it is. And then we tried to touch at least very briefly on each of the objectives. So we heard a little bit from Tim about how the old model in terms of where we do community engagement when a new park or a new program is being rolled out, and then we have a prescribed plan of how that community engagement is done, as being an old model, and a new model that he's rolling out, which is more continuous community engagement, where we're constantly keeping a pulse on who's being served, how they're being served, what they'd like to see, things like that. So I think that was kind of what we talked about in a nutshell. I'm sure there's more that I am not repeating because there was a lot. If there's anybody from my group that wants to emphasize or bring up anything I missed.
Well, thank you for that report. That sounds like a very pretty far-ranging conversation for 10 minutes. So our group focused mostly on equity, and it was a good conversation. You know, we talked about how in the polling for the bond measure that tree maintenance was not popular. And so, you know, that's why would we do that if people aren't going to feel like that's a good use of their tax dollars? And then we talked about the concrete issue of there's people with hungry children, there's parks that are not being able to be maintained regularly, that aren't as safe in some neighborhoods compared to other neighborhoods. Those are the discrete, tangible items that we really need to address foremost, and then we can plan for street trees and reducing the urban heat island effects in East Portland compared to west of the Willamette. So really looking at how can we start dismantling the decades of disenfranchisement that has occurred in some neighborhoods. So it was a pretty thorough discussion, I felt. And I think we all kind of came to the conclusion that we need the concrete, and hopefully I'm not speaking for myself, but for the group, that we also need to have the longer term, because as Kenyon pointed out, the trees that he just planted with his wife and at his property, it's going to be 30 to 40 years before the shade is there. So, you know, got to make the case for why that's important to people who have those more direct issues currently. Did I cover it, group 2? I see a head nodding. Okay, I'll take that as a positive. So this is helpful. Clearly, having the equity lens for our work going forward is a really important touch point that we were going to keep coming back to. And there's a lot of work to be done. So there's not going to be any lack of projects to take on here in the rest of this year. Any other thoughts or conclusions regarding this conversation? I look forward to more like this as we go forward to kind of assess how we're doing and where we need to invest our time and energy.
I just want to say one thing I wasn't able to say in the smaller group, which I sound a little bit like a broken record on this, but we have a public policy procedure we don't follow. And that's probably fine, but if we're not going to follow it, maybe we should again redo it so that it's something we do follow. Because it's like this pet peeve of mine that we have this thing out there that we don't do. So maybe that's something that can be taken up at some point, either to follow it or to make it simpler so we don't have to worry about following. Sorry, a lot of background noise, but you get the point.
Actually, Aaron, I had a question just to make sure I'm clear about what do you see us not following with our public policy procedure?
Yeah, the procedure outlines that we'll actually be setting an agenda for soliciting public comment. The public comment policy, is that what I said? Yeah, public comment procedure. We don't do any of that. So we don't solicit, we don't set an agenda for who we want to hear from or what topics we want to talk about. We don't solicit public comment from anybody. So we don't do any of that. So
yeah,
again, I actually don't know that I have strong views either way. It's just the fact that we have that out there and we're not doing it.
Yeah,
that relates to community engagement, of course.
It does. And, you know, it is part of the mandate that we're asking the community development group to take on. And so we're looking forward to hearing from them on the progress that they're making on this, because yes, we do need to be engaged with the community, and we can't do this in a bubble, even though park staff has a really good program for robust engagement. So thank you. So are there other, we're getting close to wrapping up here. Are there other topics that we'd like to include in our agenda for January? And again, this is an open invitation. We usually meet a couple of weeks prior to the next meeting to work on our agenda. So you can email, text, call me or Bonnie with any thoughts that occur to you in terms of agenda. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I think this was a very engaging last part of our meeting today, and I look forward to wishing you all happy holidays and a great 2021 rather. Hopefully it's a more healthy and peaceful year than 2020 has been. And I look forward to seeing all of you in January. Bye.
Bye. Thanks all.